there, this is Ross Izzard, and this is the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, where we talk about fly fishing in more interesting places. Out of the gate, I owe you guys, well, a couple of apologies, unfortunately. The first one is that I am recording this on a different microphone than usual because I've got a technical issue with my main microphone, which means it might not sound as good. And I apologize. Audio quality has been something that I have really focused on over the last 6 seasons, and I think it's gotten much better. I am not an audiophile by training. I'm a fly fisherman, not a political guy. But I apologize if the sound quality for this episode is not as good. I promise it's temporary. We will get back to where we need to be, and hopefully you can hear me just fine anyway. And hey, we're all just a bunch of dirtbag fly fishermen anyway, so hopefully it'll be fine. The second apology I have for you is that I apparently can't count, and I believed that we were entering season 5. But because it had been a couple months since we ended the actual season 5, I did not realize this is actually season 6. And so thank you to those of you who pointed that out to me. This is in fact season 6 of the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast, which is actually even more fun because it's awesome that we made it to season 6. I thought we were doing pretty good at season 5. So now we're at season 6. And I've learned a valuable lesson, which is that I should either actually know how to count or maybe stop using numbers for things that don't matter. Because the reality is it doesn't matter if it's season 6 or season 800. It's all pretty much going to be the same. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but I did feel bad that it happened. So thank you for pointing it out to me, and I will do my best to correctly refer to the season number from here on out. And then finally, I wanted to address a note. Actually, a couple of notes that I got from folks about the first episode of this season, all about frontier water. And for those of you who listened to it, it was sort of a mix of me talking about my need to be outside, my need to be in difficult to access wild places, why that's so important to me, and then talking about sort of how you do that in these frontier water areas in the early season. And that means areas and waters that are close to town, maybe close to better known waters, but much harder to access. They demand more of you, and they're less trafficked. They're usually less pressured, and they're more wild. And I got a bunch of notes from folks saying they loved the episode. They really connected with the sort of ethos and philosophy behind it, and that was awesome. I really appreciated that engagement. I also got a couple of notes from folks who said that they felt like judged or put down a little bit because that's not how they fish. And I wanted to take a minute just to clear that up here before we jump into the content for today's episode and say that I'm not here to judge anybody for how you fish. There are lots of people. In fact, the vast majority of fly fishers out there fish better known waters. They fish close to the car. They don't do a bunch of hiking. They're not taking a bunch of risks, and they prefer it that way. And that's okay, right? Everybody's got a different level of risk tolerance. Everyone likes to fish a different way. People have their own unique circumstances and preferences and ideas and everything that leads them to fish a certain way. And I'm not here to tell you that my way is right or that your way is right or that you're less of a fly fisherman or fly fisher woman because you happen to fish a different way than I do. I'm just here to tell you how I feel about how I fish and where I fish and why I do that, which is very, very important to me. And so understand that just because I'm not into super easy pull-off fishing, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do that sometimes. I have to because I only have limited time, and sometimes it's what I want to do. But most of the time, I don't like that. I don't feel like it is as authentic of an experience for me as being out in the wild and really having to earn it. Now, you may feel differently, and that's okay. You may experience fly fishing differently, and that's okay. You might think I'm a crazy person and be like, I don't know, there's just something wrong with that dude. And you might be right, if we're being honest. But the point is that however you fish is how you fish. Fly fishing, as we've said a million times, is intensely personal. Everybody does it differently. Everybody feels a little bit differently about it. And that's okay. I'm not here to tell you that you're doing it right or doing it wrong or anything else. I'm just here to tell you how I experience it. And I think a lot of people connect with that. If you don't connect with that, that's okay. And I'm actually happy to talk through that with you over email or over Instagram DMs or wherever you want to do. I'll take you to coffee if you're in the neighborhood. But I do want to be clear that this podcast is about backcountry fly fishing. And that's not to say that there aren't things that you can't glean for regular off-the-road fly fishing. I mean, certainly like the stuff we're going to talk about today, as far as gear systems and efficiencies, definitely applicable to fishing wherever you go. Fishing tactics, some types of gear recommendations, other things are definitely applicable everywhere you go. And I think that's awesome. So I'm happy to have you guys here, and I think it's wonderful that you're here, and I think it's awesome that you're fishing the way that you're fishing and having a great time. Seriously, I really do. We're also going to spend some time really talking about pushing into remote areas and wilderness areas because that is the core of backcountry fly fishing. Now, I can't tell you what backcountry means to you. For you, it might mean that it's a mile away from the car or 2 miles away from the car. It might mean that you drove up a really rough dirt road. It might just mean that you're at a place that's far away from town, even if it's off of a paved road. And all of that is fine. I actually am not terribly concerned with how you define the word backcountry. We played with that real early in the podcast, and I defined it as any type of fishing that requires specialized equipment to access, and that's still how I feel about it. But you might feel differently about it. And hey, if you feel like you're out there and you're pushing the envelope and you're having an adventure, that's awesome. I'm really happy for you. I'm not here to tell you you got to do it my way. And I just wanted to clear that up. So I don't want folks coming away from these episodes feeling like a layout of my philosophy and my ethos and why I do this particular thing and why I prefer it very strongly to other types of fly fishing is somehow an attack against you, because I'm not here to attack you. I'm happy to talk about it with you where we can work it out. But I do want to be clear that we're not better than any other fly fisher out there. We're just doing something different. And this podcast is about doing something different at its core. So that's where that conversation came from. And I think that's it for the apologies / explanations up front, which means that we can now dive into episode 2 of season not 5, but 6 of the Backcountry Fly Fishing Podcast. And today's episode is all about sort of getting yourself set up and ready from a gear and a systems perspective for backcountry fly fishing season. We talked about frontier water last week, as I mentioned. We have talked in the past about the freestone starting to open up in the early spring, the way that the world sort of slowly opens to you out in the wider, wild universe. So first it's the lower elevation streams and canyons, and it's the slightly higher ones, then eventually you're in the alpine, then you're at the high alpine lakes. And that is a really interesting sort of rollout of the fishing season. And it sort of demands that you get ready for it if you want to be efficient and avoid problems down the line. And we've touched on this a little bit. We have had episodes about the gear that I carry, the stuff that I have. We'll do more of that this season actually too. But in the interest of really helping you get set up, this is less about the stuff that you should have and more about your system for being ready to go fishing. And to do that, I'm going to sort of explain my system for how I get ready for the season. Not how I get ready for any individual trip. That might be part of the discussion. But specifically how I get ready for the fishing season so that it is simple, reliable, repeatable, and more resistant to failure. And those are really the things we're looking for in any system, right? You want it to be faster, you want it to be simple, you want it to be reliable, and you want it to be resistant to failure. And failure can mean a whole bunch of things. It could mean gear failure, it could mean forgetting something, it could mean being unprepared because you're in a hurry. But you want your system to sort of be a guardrail or a guard against that. And that's why I have one, right? Because I want this to be simple. Time is precious. I'm busy. You're all busy. We all have real life to deal with. And the simpler and more efficient you can make this, the less you're going to have to think about it. The less you think about it, the more time you can spend thinking about other stuff, including fishing. And probably the better and safer your experience out there is going to be. And so I'm a big believer in systems and routines and habits because I think they make your life better. I think that they start to reorganize your thinking. I think they make you better at just about every part of your life, including fly fishing and being outside. And so I'm a really big believer in this. And that's not to say that I'm a crazy person who's like, have to have everything laid out in this particular order. It's not that. It's simpler than that, and it's not super intimidating, but it is something that I've been using for years. I've refined over the course of many seasons of doing this. And now I sort of rely on pretty heavily because it does make the experience quantifiably better. And so we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about my system. So when the spring rolls around and the world starts to open up again and it's time to start going fishing again, how do I sort of get ready and prepped for the season and get that system in place? And the first thing that I do is I check my gear, right? And this is something that I think people overlook. When you're done fishing for the backcountry season, even if you fish during the winter, because you're probably swapping out gear and you're using different equipment in the wintertime, and it's sort of like a whole shift when you go to the winter. But when you get to the back half of fall, September, October, maybe November, depending on the year, and you're sort of done with the serious backcountry universe of fly fishing for the year because stuff is starting to freeze up, it's getting cold, conditions change, whatever. If you're like me, you probably pull all your shit out of your car or truck and you throw it in your garage or wherever you store it. And it just kind of sits there. And yeah, you might break it out for the winter with your sort of separate set of winter gear. But for the most part, your summer stuff, your serious outside backcountry stuff, is sort of just put aside for the year. And you start piecemealing stuff into your winter gear, you start dealing with whatever, but largely you just forget about it. Or at least I did for a long time. And that means that you're not checking your gear, which is a real problem because you just spent a whole bunch of months probably beating the crap out of these things, right? So you're ripping your net on tree branches, for instance. I had holes in both of my nets. I actually have two nets for exactly this reason. And the net basket, the netting, will get stuck on tree branches when I'm bushwhacking or hiking, and it will eventually tear holes in it, which allow fish to escape. And that sucks when you catch a really awesome fish and you're getting your phone out to take a picture, and then you look down and there's no fish because your net got ripped. You can have micro damage to your fly rods from whacking them on a rock or dropping them a couple times or sticking them in the ground while you're hiking or smacking a tree or whatever. There's a million things that could happen there. Your reels can have dirt and sand and dust and grime in them, or they can have tangles buried down in the line or the fly line. There are a bunch of things that can happen there. Even if you're using nice reels with sealed drag systems that are mostly resistant to that, there can still be issues. Your rain jacket can have holes in it, right? You could have damage that you didn't notice before. You could have taken out your socks, or you might have socks that have holes in them as your backup socks buried down in the bottom of your bag. Your fire starting equipment might be old or ruined or out of fuel, depending on what you're using. Your water filters could be not working anymore. In fact, I just had this happen to me, which is exactly why, quick aside, I carry 2 water filters at all times because you never know when something could fail and redundancy matters. I went out the other day to go fish, and I had to filter water because that often happens when you're hiking a bunch and sucking down a ton of fluids. And sure enough, I break out my main water filter and it doesn't work. Why? Because one of the O-rings inside the filter had fallen out. So without the O-ring, it's not waterproof. That now means that I have dirty river water running down into the clean water that I'm filtering, and that's just not going to do. So that filter is useless. I didn't check it. My bad. Thankfully, I had an extra. Had I not had an extra, that could have turned into a really bad situation. Now I'm 5 miles into something, and I don't have a water filter, and I don't have any water. That's not a good thing, right? Now I'm facing either dehydration or trying to find an alternate way to filter or taking my chances drinking unfiltered stream water, which is really not a good idea. Please don't do that unless you really like being sick. It's not great. So that could have been bad, and that was because I didn't check it. And there's also something to be said for checking your pack itself. I've had my backpack break on me before, and that's something that you need to be aware of. And then, of course, there's always the possibility that you just forgot something, right? I mean, things can be broken. You could have forgotten something. There's a lot of stuff that can go wrong. And so the best thing you can do, and the first thing that I do every season before it starts really kind of opening back up is like late March, early April, whenever it looks like the door is kind of cracking, I will sit down and go through all my stuff. I'm going to check everything. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to unfold it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to test it. I'm going to pull out the rods. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to pull out the reels. I'm going to pull out the line. I'm going to check my leaders. I'm going to check my stuff. I'm going to see if I still have floating stuff in my bag or gink in my bag. I'm going to see if I still have floating powder in my bag because that stuff gets all granulated and gross after you've used it for a season. I'm going to make sure I have tippet rings. I'm going to make sure that my fly boxes are full. I'm going to check everything to make sure that it is all good. And that is a baseline requirement. And if you don't do that, I promise it is not if, it's when something bad is going to happen. Now, the something bad could just be that you forgot a convenience item, and that sucks. Something bad could be that you break a rod, which also sucks and might mean that you're not fishing if you don't have a backup, which is why we always carry 2. Something bad could be a whole bunch of other things, ranging from irritating to downright dangerous, right? Having no water filter in the middle of nowhere, pretty dangerous. Not having safety and survival gear with you if you're off by yourself in the middle of nowhere, potentially pretty dangerous. Those are big deals. Forgetting your devices, right? This is the other thing I check. Are your battery packs charged where you're charging things when you're out in the field? Do you have the cables still in there? Are the cables okay? Are they not frayed? Because if you're out there and you're relying on a satellite device or an inReach or your phone for navigation or safety or contact or access or messaging or mapping or whatever, and those things are dead or malfunctioning or needed an update that you haven't done, or you didn't download the offline maps, or whatever it could be, then you can get yourself in trouble. And if they run out of battery and you don't have cables and your battery pack's not charged because you forgot to do that at the end of last season, also, you can be in trouble. So the first step is to grab your shit, lay it out on a big open space on the floor, get everything out and check it. And I don't mean half-ass check it. I don't mean like put an eyeball on it and go, yeah, it looks fine, whatever. I mean really check it. Put your hands on it, look at it, inspect it, check it out. Same thing with your boots, same thing with your pants, same thing with your waders, all that stuff. Check it all. Trust me, it will pay dividends later and it will save you from situations that could have been avoided had you just been willing to do this one step. It'll take you probably 30 minutes, maybe a little bit longer if you find a problem, but then you can either repair or replace or fix or whatever you need to do to make sure that you're good. After that, before you put all your stuff back into your bag, and back into your fly pack, and back into your backpack, or whatever you do, however your system works. I can't tell you how your system works. I can tell you how mine works, but everybody does it a little bit differently. Now, you are going to make a list of all the things that you actually need to have in your backpack. And if you're talking about a day pack bag, we actually have an episode just on this called Packing for Self-Reliance, where I run through everything that I have with me on day trips and even some shorter overnight trips. And there's a physical checklist linked in those show notes that you can go grab, download, and use as a reference point. Doesn't mean you have to do it exactly my way, but each of those items has a specific slot for a specific reason in my gear system. And so my humble recommendation would be that you not cut corners and bring the whole list with you. You can make your own decisions. Just understand that when you start leaving things out of your pack, you are making a trade-off between convenience and safety. And that is not always something that you ought to be doing, in my opinion, from an outdoors perspective. But go grab that list, make your own list, take somebody else's list. I don't care. I have zero nerve endings attached to that. But either way, have a list. And before you put all that shit back in your bag, you are going to break out the list. And as you put items back into your bag, you are going to check off the item from your list to make sure that you actually have it. And if you don't have an item on the list, then this is a pretty easy solution. You're going to go get that item and put it in your bag and then check it off the list. Or if you have an item that's broken, you're going to replace it or repair it and then check it off the list when you put it back in your bag. But the point being that when you are done putting all of this stuff back together, you should be 100% confident that everything in your bag, in your pack, in your gear is present and accounted for, working in working order, not broken, not damaged, not fried, none of that stuff, available in a place where you can actually find it, right? This is also an opportunity for you to organize your bag the way that you would like. And really, I know too many people who spend a ton of time outside who don't take pack organization seriously. And the result of that is, number one, they can't find any of their shit. And if you can't find your stuff, then guess what? It's not going to help you. And also, it can be really uncomfortable, right? It's inconvenient to have to take your bag off and pull everything out of the main compartment because you couldn't be bothered to organize stuff into the side compartments and the zippers and everything else and the pockets inside. But also, it can make it really uncomfortable to hike with, right? How you load your pack really matters. And we probably will do an episode or maybe an explainer video on Instagram on how I do that at some point. But the point being, this is your chance to make sure everything's there, everything's good, and there are no holes in your system, and it's all packed correctly, and you are ready to go. That is a really important step, okay? And it's not just your backpack. I want to be really clear about that because I'm using the term pack sort of interchangeably here. It's everything. So you're going to do this step with your backpack, which includes all of your gear, all of your safety stuff, all your food stuff, your water bladder, your water filters, probably your fly rods and fly rod tube, probably your reels, maybe some other stuff. And then you also need to do it with whatever bag you use for your fly gear, right? So if you're carrying a chest pack, go through that chest pack, check it, pull everything out, look at it, check it, make sure it's organized because these things if your fly bag looks anything like mine by the end of the season, it's like a grenade went off in there. It's a mess. Go through, clean it up, get rid of the old shit that you don't need anymore. Get new stuff if you need it. Make sure everything is in working order and then repack it so it's ready to go. And I don't have a checklist for what should be in your fly bag because, to be honest with you, that's up to you as an angler to figure out, and that's half the fun. But you probably know what you want in your fly bag, and maybe at some point I'll do an episode about fly bags and whatever, and I can just tell you how mine is set up. I've talked a little bit about it in previous episodes, but in any case, make sure that's good to go too. And then check all of your ancillary gear, right? So I mentioned like checking boots earlier. This is really important. If you've ever had a hiking boot fail on you in the wild, or a wading boot for that matter, you know how bad it sucks, right? If a sole falls off, or if your toes pop through the end, or it tears, or a lace fails, or whatever, it can be a nightmare. Now, is it fixable? Sure. I've hiked down off of mountains with busted boots before. But that only works if you have duct tape and paracord. Throwing that out there, two things that really should be on your list and should be in your pack when you go through this exercise. And number two, you really don't want that to happen, right? You want to make sure that your equipment works. So like checking your wading socks, making sure that your boots don't have holes in them, making sure the laces are good. All of that stuff should happen because you need to know that all of that stuff is good and ready to go and accounted for, right? Same with trekking poles. If you use those, we're actually going to do an episode about trekking poles, I think, here soon, because I really have very strong positive opinions about those and think they merit a conversation for anybody who's doing serious hiking, including to go fly fishing, and maybe even more so for folks who are going fly fishing for reasons we can get into later. But you're checking all of that stuff too, okay? And then, this is the really important thing. You are going to take all of these things that have been checked and run through a list and accounted for, and you are going to do whatever you're going to do with them and put them where they go. And I know that that sounds sort of ambiguous and nebulous, and I guess in some ways it sort of is. But the reason I leave it that way is because this is different for everybody. Okay, some people have like a mud room in their house and all of their stuff goes there. Some people have a specific corner of the garage and all of their stuff goes there. Some people just use their trucks. I very often just leave stuff in my car or in my truck for the summer because I'm in the water so often and I'm fishing so often. It doesn't really make sense to be schlepping my crap back and forth into the house. It just doesn't. But wherever you put it, it needs to be the same place, and you need to be able to routinize, the idea being that you create a routine, how you go and get that stuff for your trips. So if you're going, let's say it's a Tuesday, and you're going to go fishing. On Monday night, you know where you're going to go to get all your stuff so that you can pack it in your car. I really strongly recommend that you do this the night before you leave, especially when we're leaving early in the morning. You're kind of tired. You're a little fuzzy. You don't want to leave stuff until the last minute because that's how you forget stuff or screw up or whatever. And I've done this before. I've gotten to the river and realized that I left my fly bag at home. And it's like, oh, well, damn it. I guess I'm not fishing today. Or it could be something else. Who knows what else you might have forgotten. But it could be something critical, and then your day is ruined after you've driven potentially a pretty long way, and that sucks. So wherever you put this stuff, it really doesn't matter. Inside the front door, in your garage, in a mudroom, in a closet, in your car, in your whatever, in your front yard. I don't care where you put your stuff. But make sure that you always put your stuff together and that you always put it in the same place. And don't deviate from that system. So when you come back from that trip, you are not going to take your pack and throw it to the side in the garage and chuck your hiking boots over there and drop your fly bag on your fly desk and move all this stuff over here and take a reel out and throw it into your reel drawer or wherever you keep them and hope for the best. Because what that means is, at the best, you are going to have to repeat a bunch of effort to go find and organize all of that shit into your pack, which takes time and is inefficient and can be really annoying, especially if you're fishing a lot. So at the best sort of situation, the best case scenario, you are creating an inefficient situation that will sort of make your life worse. And we shouldn't do that, right? If you don't have to make your life worse, then you shouldn't make your life worse. But the worst case scenario is that when you do that, you start forgetting things, right? When this stuff is not self-contained, when that system is not built, when that routine is not built, and this stuff is not contained the right way, the likelihood of you forgetting something goes up every single time. And that's especially true if you are just haphazardly throwing your stuff and leaving your stuff wherever you do, because it gets really hard to keep track of where everything is. And it gets really hard to keep track of where you put this thing and where you put that thing and which things you remove from your bag and which ones you put back in your bag and which ones you had last time or which ones you forgot last time. It gets really, really hard. So think about this almost like, when you were a kid and you played with toys, and your mom or your dad were like, okay, when you're done with your toys, all of the toys go into the toy box. They go in there every time. And then the toy box goes to a place, usually. And I get it. Some of you probably had parents who didn't care about that stuff. But most of us, particularly on my end, I had boxes for my stuff. There was a box for dinosaurs. There was a box for action figures. There was a box for race cars. And when I was done playing, all of my stuff went back in the boxes. And then the boxes went to a specific place. And so if I ever needed a race car, I knew where they were. And if I ever needed a dinosaur, I knew where they were. You're trying to create that same level of containment inside your fishing gear. And so you go out, you fish, things get messy, things get scattered, whatever. But when you come back, you put it all back together into that box, into that system, into that pack, and then you put it where it goes every single time. And if that's the trunk of your car, rad. If it's somewhere else, rad. It really doesn't matter. It just needs to be somewhere that is repeatable and where you know where to go so that you have that level of reliability. Going along with that, you really don't want to change this too much, right? So that's not to say that you shouldn't be dynamic with what you're carrying with you, okay? So fly fishing in general and backcountry fly fishing especially are learning experiences. You're going to go out and be like, man, I really wish that I had this or that or the other. Or I'd like to swap this out, or I think that would work better. I mean, you're going to be constantly making adjustments, and that's okay. That's fine. I think the trick is that you don't want to be changing the system itself. So like if you're going to swap out rods, maybe you decide that you want to use a 5-weight instead of a 4-weight. That's okay. Just make the 5-weight part of the system and the 4-weight part of the system rather than swapping in and out rods. And let's be real, you're going to have to do a little bit of that. I use a different rod at lakes than I do at small streams, and I use a different rod at big streams than I do at lakes or small streams. So there is some swapping that's going to happen here, but I'm saying don't make major unintentional alterations to your gear. Instead, think really intentionally about it. Be like, if I'm going to change this, if I'm going to switch something out, I am going to do that in a way that folds into the system and is then included in the system so that you're not constantly making weird changes to it from a gear perspective. But going along with that, you also don't want to make changes to your system, right? So like if your system is that you go out the night before and load up your car by going to your special spot, getting all your stuff, putting it in the car and being ready to go the next day, don't deviate from that. If your system is that you keep it in the back of your car, don't deviate from that. Wherever you keep your stuff, however you manage the routine of getting ready and getting out of the house, don't change that. And I know that that sounds petty and people are like, well, it's real life and it's going to look different sometimes and whatever. And I hear you. Like there might be extenuating circumstances, but the less change you introduce into that behavior and into that routine, the more likely you are to always be prepared and ready to go. And number one, that means you can be ready to rock at a moment's notice if an afternoon frees up and you can go fishing. Number two, it means you're going to spend less time stressing and running around trying to make sure you have everything. Number three, it means that you're really never going to get out there and be like, oh man, I don't have this or I don't have that or I didn't prepare for that. You're not going to ever have that really happen to you. As long as you don't mess with the system, and if you do mess with the system, you move houses or something happens or your wife throws you out or I don't know, whatever might happen to you, then the whole system needs to move, right? So like if suddenly you don't keep your stuff in the garage and now you keep it in the living room, then that's where you always go, is back to the living room. If you now carry this thing instead of that thing, you need to do that all the time. And it's about building habit, building repetition, building consistency into that system so that you don't ever have to worry about it. It'll make a huge difference. Trust me on this. I know this seems like a small thing. I know this seems like less of a serious issue than which type of fly to use when you get there or how to start a fire or anything else, but it really is not. Because from a basic perspective, if you don't have the right stuff with you and you don't have the right gear and you're not set up correctly, you are placing yourself into situations that are at best not fun and not as good as they could be, and at worst possibly dangerous and irresponsible. And you don't ever want to do that. You don't want to be stupid that way. Trust me. So many people get themselves into trouble outside, including really bad trouble, because they simply didn't take the time to be prepared, to have a system, to have everything they needed, and to ensure that they were ready to be out there, especially alone. So don't make that mistake. Once you get to the river, once you get to the water, once you start hiking, there's a whole nother setup here and a routine that goes into that. How do you suit up? How do you gear down? Order of operations. That's something that I would really like to talk about on the podcast as well, but it's sort of a different topic. For today, I really hope that you are going to get off this podcast and be like, I really could be more intentional and more systematic about how I deal with my gear and being ready for the season as it approaches, and really in some ways it's already arrived in a lot of the country, and go do that. That's a great way to spend your weekend. It's a great way to get yourself ready to go. It's a cool way to it's kind of fun, right? You get to organize, you get to get prepped, and prepping can be fun, I think, if you have the right mindset. But I hope that you will take this and use it to start building your own system and your own routine so that you can have the best possible season out there. Because that's what I want for you. I want you to go out. I want you to have an awesome time. I want you to be safe while you're doing it. I want you to be prepared. And then I want you to come back and do it again the next week, and do it again the next week, and do it again the next week, and share the stories with your friends and your kids and your loved ones and me and whoever else. That's what I want for you. And this is the foundational block, the cornerstone of a really good fishing season and fishing experience for me. So guys, have fun organizing your gear. I hope you're out there fishing. The weather's been kind of weird here a little bit, some snow, some sun. It's been kind of odd, which is typical for the spring, but I hope you're out there. Hope you're having a blast, and I can't wait to see you back here next week. Till next time, this is Ross, and maybe I'll see you out there. I just hope you didn't forget anything important.